Hi guys, I'm Matt Dodona. I am the editor of the Trump Survival Guide, which came out today, January 10th, which is 10 days before Trump's inauguration. I'm here with two of the writers, Gene Stone, far left, and Nick Bromley, who put this book together. And we're just going to have a chat about the book and why it was written. And if you'd like to leave any comments, please do so, and we will try to answer them as quickly as possible. All right, guys, so you're sitting at your homes or your friends' homes on the election night, and Trump gets elected, and you realize, oh my God, what are we going to do? You have to write a book. So how did this book come about, and why was it so important to get out so quickly?
I would say there was a delay of a week between what you just said and the realization that a book should be done. The reverse, there was that moment around 9:30 or 10 when the New York Times needle is going from Hillary to Trump, and you're going, oh, things aren't working out. Then there was a week of, what would you call it, solid depression, dejection, not eating,
Denial.
losing weight, denial, probably a lot of really bad things. And then after about a week, there was this moment where I was thinking, well, we really need to do something. This isn't, being depressed, sitting around moping, this isn't the answer. So my feeling was, the idea, get a book out as soon as possible. So I called Nick, who I often work with, and said, what do you think about doing a book? And he said, sure. And I said, well, what do you think about doing a book in maybe less than 2 weeks?
And I said, okay.
Yeah, right.
So you had a team of writers, and how did you all decide? So the book is broken up into different topics on social and political issues.
Right.
So how did you guys decide who's going to research and who's going to write, and how are we going to fact check and all of that?
Well, we each decided that we'd do our own writing and research because we didn't have time to have one person doing one task and someone else doing the other. But at some point to cull down the topics. We had 20 at one point, and we had to combine some because the book had to be short.
Right, because the first idea was how to organize the book, and what I was thinking is that it should be done by issue, because this really isn't simply a book for Democrats, a book against Republicans. For instance, one of the issues is the environment. A lot of Republicans feel very strongly about the environment, are very worried about what Trump is going to do. So we came up with about 20 topics and narrowed it down, and then most of these people were people I'd worked with before, and so I knew specifically, maybe this is a guy who could do the economy, maybe this is somebody who could fact check on civil rights. So, it really was just 12 days. It was so intense, even trying to remember how it all happened. I'm not even sure. I just remember there are a lot of nights, at 2 in the morning, where I'm going, oh man, we forgot a major issue. I wonder what it was. I've already forgotten it.
Yeah, but we were at his apartment with 8 of us, whoever it was, and who can do economy? Who can do economy? Who can do Obamacare? Who can do that? So it was not a very scientific process of how we actually.
And actually, one of the first things was trying to figure out the organization of the book in terms of it should be done with a background on the issue itself, sort of a primer for people who forget the history of immigration in America, then what Obama did, because we mostly feel pretty strongly he did pretty good things, then what Trump might do, because we don't really know yet, and so this is all still up in the air, and most importantly, a resource guide for what the reader can do, and that's really the heart of the book. Maybe you feel like we do about everything, maybe you feel about the environment, or gay issues, or women's issues, but whatever issue you feel really strongly about, here's what you can do.
Right. And I remember when Nick first called me about this idea, and he said, well, we were thinking, how do we structure it, and is this something we want more on the serious side or more on the comical side? And we all agreed. I mean, it was sort of self-evident. This is serious, and this has to be a really valuable resource guide for everyone, for novices and people who are more experienced in activism, because I think this election in particular is so much more widespread. And it's affected a lot more people.
Right. Well, I did in 2004 write a book in 5 days called The Bush Survival Bible, which was a big bestseller, making surprises. Everybody was very surprised about that one. It sold 150,000 copies in something like 4 weeks. But that book was funny because at the time, as badly as we felt about Bush in many ways, he was still in the ballpark. And so you could do a funny book, and there are funny jokes, although there was some sort of
We were
stuff
4 years in already to Bush.
And we were already 4 years into a Bush administration.
Yeah.
I think when we first started thinking about this book, correct me if I'm wrong, we didn't laugh. It wasn't like we were sitting around making Trump jokes.
Sure.
We were thinking about, oh my God, what do we have to do?
Right, right.
Yeah, and we were worried that because there was about a month lag between when we finished the book, turned it in, and when it was published, even a little more, and worried that, you know, Trump might be releasing all these initiatives and ideas and have all these things going, but the truth is he hasn't done much at all.
Right.
And that is a testament to how he doesn't have any ideas to begin with. So we're like, it's
Yeah, we've definitely talked about that.
Yeah.
How some of maybe the scariest part is that no agenda whatsoever has been put forward.
Well, the agenda,
So-
the only agenda that we could figure out is
Right.
the agenda that is reflected by his choices for his cabinet.
Right.
And I have to say, I don't think anybody on the more progressive side of the fence is looking at these people and going, oh, this is a good one, or I'm really in favor of this guy. In fact, part of the problem is people are sitting back going, how do we fight all of them, which probably can't be done. I think, I read somewhere that maybe in the last, 50 years, only 6 cabinet choices haven't made it through Congress. So it's very unlikely
Right,
you can
right.
get rid of somebody. So of all of these people, maybe one of them won't get through,
Maybe
but all the others
Tillerson,
will.
yeah.
And Tillerson, is most
Sure,
likely.
sure.
Or DeVos.
And now you have, and DeVos is mentioned in the education chapter. And so how did you guys realize between Trump getting elected, appointing these people, and getting the book out, how were you able to balance what might happen and what is evident from now on? Like how can you,
Well, there are some tweets we use. I mean,
Sure.
the thing is, Trump has been so all over the board in terms of what he said he's going to do or what he won't do. He said he'll repeal Obamacare, and then the next day with the Wall Street Journal said, oh, well, maybe we'll see what happens. So we could use the fact that he's so erratic as the basis of our predictions, because the point is we don't really know what he will do, and we are looking with Obamacare, for example, we have plans that the GOP has put forth that will be the basis of what Trump might want to do, and we can go from that. But in the end, the book needs to be about what the reader can do to fight back towards whatever he does, because so many things he can possibly do.
And then in the organization of the book, as I said, the Obama section was easy to do because it's done. But the Trump section, what we pretty much tried to do was show you the worst possible scenario. In other words, if Trump does really great things, well then you don't really need the resource guide because you're in favor of it.
Sure.
But if it turns out he doesn't do those things, that's why the resource guide is there, and here are the things you can do to fight that.
and let's talk about that. So, as stated, the end of each chapter is a really, really nice resource guide, replete with actionable steps, and then a reading guide for books to read and consider. So, what are some things, long-term and short-term, we can do? I mean, is it all just related to what Trump might do, or are these just general resources as well?
Well, I came up with, remember Rick Perry at the debate going, oops? I came up with a device, so I would remember, called Code B. And this means you should call, you should organize, you should donate, you should educate, and boycott. And I would say that although within each section, there are specifics that apply only to that particular section, in general, I would say that those 5 things are the most important things you can do. For instance, calling. People don't realize that calling your representative, calling the member of Congress, that's really a really powerful step, and people have to start doing. The Tea Party figured that out a long time ago, and they flood their members of Congress with calls all the time. On our side, we don't tend to do that either because we're too polite or we don't know how to do it. It's really important to do that.
It's just showing up is the big thing. And I mean, I hate using the Tea Party as an analogy, but the truth is, for all the wrong reasons, but they showed up in 2010 when the Democrats were looking at passing the first stage of their health care plan. They showed up at the actual town hall events, which are boring and stuffy and usually ill-attended. They showed up and they yelled and they were angry, and it scared the crap out of Democrats, and that's what I think made the bill less strong than it could have been, because people showed up and actually made their voice heard. And we tried to keep the resource guide pretty general because so many things are going to happen under Trump, and there'll be very specific things you can do. But when it comes to calling a congressman, first call their home office in their own district, because you have people from your town, from your state actually staffing it. They write down your call and then call the DC office, because you get people you actually might even know you. And some of these small
And what were
districts-
people doing before? I mean, I think as you said in the book, so many people want to email. And
You can, but it's not. There's so many emails, it gets spammed. I mean, you have to call your home district first, and then call your DC district, and then email.
right.
And then going back to Code B, organize. People really need to understand that if you're just sitting by yourself thinking about doing stuff, that's probably not going to be effective. And again, we don't like using the Tea Party, but they were successful. Organize, work with other people, get a group together, start having coffee with people, discussing things to do. Maybe you can sign petitions together, maybe you can go volunteer together, but you really need to organize. And then we get to donate, and this is really important. We need money. The Tea Party was funded in part by the Koch brothers. That's a lot of money there. We need money too. And even if you're only going to give, let's say, $5, $10, still that's a vote for that organization. The people opening envelopes, they see all that money come in, they feel good. So you really want to donate money too. It doesn't have to be $1 million because you don't have $1 million. $5 is good enough, $10, whatever you have.
Sure, and when millions of people are doing it, it's going to have that greater effect. And as you said before, you may not be concerned about every issue in this book, but what you do is you really narrow down and drill down into the issues that concern.
And again, educate, which is the next part of the thing,
Right.
is that you really do need to educate yourself. We've got this issue of false news going on. People don't really know false news, fake news, Fox News. It's so hard to figure out what's real and what isn't. So part of what you need to do is educate yourself and educate others. I think, Nick, I think you were the person who wrote the section on it was important in the Obamacare issue to educate seniors. They may not know that if they lose their Obamacare, they're going to be in trouble. There's a great news story go around today about the guy, it's all over Facebook, it's going viral. The guy who said, well, I don't care about Obamacare, I still have my Affordable Care Act.
Yes.
It was so unbelievable. I thought it must have been made up, but it's
No, apparently
surely
it's real.
It's real. So
Yeah.
that's real.
Yeah, and that's
news.
the main pillar of those resource guides, is to make sure that you're staying informed, not just with information, but actual good information. And a part of that is getting news from traditional outlets like the New York Times, Washington Post, people who, newspapers actually pay to have people following the president who are actually there doing actual reporting.
Right.
And they need your support, because if there's no one there to report on the horrible things Trump's doing,
Right.
no one will know about it.
Back to that Meryl Streep,
Right.
beautiful
Very
speech she
beautiful.
said, and yeah, there has to be accountability and there has to be gatekeepers.
Which
and-
leads to the final thing that we talk about in the book, which is boycott. Now, obviously, if everybody just boycotts everything, it's not going to work, but targeted boycotts can be enormously effective. So I would tell people to go online if there are companies that it's supporting things that you don't agree with. On the other hand, you have to be careful. For instance, another story that broke today was about one of the heiresses to LL Bean giving money to Trump. People started organizing a boycott, but it turns out she's one of, 20 or 30 heiresses. She's doing it by herself. She doesn't work at LL Bean. Doesn't make any sense to boycott LL Bean. So if you're going to boycott, which can be effective, be smart about
Pick
it.
your battles
Right.
wisely.
And you guys have listed several companies in the books
Right.
that, for example, may not represent LGBTQ rights or et cetera.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about, first, do we have any questions from any comments?
Sure, we'll share a question from Hani. He wants to know, why did you decide to call it the Trump Survival Guide? Like, what do you want the reader to take away immediately from that title?
To be able to survive Donald Trump. It's really simple. It's going to be 4 years, and it's going to be difficult. So we really want people to be able to survive this administration. Now, obviously, they'll probably survive literally, but will they survive with all their rights intact? Will they survive with the environment still safe? Will they survive with education in place? That's what the book is about.
So I also want to talk about, obviously with a question as kind of grabbing as that, with a title as grabbing as that, people might think it's just for liberals, or it's just for Democrats, or it's just for Obama
Right.
supporters. How were you able to write a book that might be, let's say, for Republicans, moderate Republicans?
Well, it was tricky because we had to make sure our tone was neutral, because it's so easy to make this a flaming liberal, we hate Trump, let's get out there and fight, and that's not what we wanted. And that's why we tried to make the history section very neutral, and we weren't that kind to Obama either. We had some
Right.
moments where we said he didn't do a great job, or we implied that, because there are some things he didn't do that well. The environment initially, his cap and trade bill failed. Initially, he was open to decreasing benefits, Social Security, Medicare. So there are things he did that that we point out, but also even on trade, we're very neutral on trade because it's an issue that Bernie supporters, Trump supporters tend to find common ground, and we didn't want to give either side of that too much exposure. So we're trying to be very neutral because we want moderate Republicans to read this book too.
It's interesting. The very first review already posted on Amazon is from a right-winger saying, I'm a total Trump supporter. But he actually gave the book 3 stars because he said, as much as I don't agree with these people, I think they did a really good job. It's a fair book.
Right, and that's actually, I mean, one of the first things I love when you sent me the first chapter. I forgot, I think it was Obamacare. Part of Obamacare's legacy is that it's so damn confusing. And what I think you guys do a good job at is really distilling a lot of this history, from civil rights to Obamacare to energy to national security, and it's really, really a nice refresher. So that's my personal.
Yeah, and it's important Obamacare because you look at 80% of working adults get their insurance through their employer, so they weren't really affected by Obamacare, and they're not one of the 22 million people who will lose their insurance if Obamacare is repealed, which it can be. So it's important to have an understanding the history of healthcare and why it's so important that people who don't have a job, a full-time job, or who are disabled, or they're sick, or they're older, or they're kids, and people who are the most vulnerable citizens in this country, and why they need health insurance, what will happen to them if Trump gets its way. And that's crucial to have that understanding.
Sure. What has been the feedback thus far from friends, family, that you were writing this book? I mean, have you guys had time to kind of reel from it, or are you still like...
Well, so far, frankly, the feedback has been great.
Yeah.
People are going, oh, this is terrific. This is exactly what we need. They just look at the cover. They haven't even looked at the book yet because the book's just being published today.
Yeah.
But I would say so far, people are pretty supportive and going, this is a book we need. I already have had several friends who said they've ordered 20 or 30 copies on Amazon.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Just out of curiosity, maybe some of the writers and other people out there might be interested in your story in that, how does a publishing company that normally tells writers it takes 1.5 years to get a book out, how did you manage to do this?
12 days.
Get your company into it.
My story is that my publisher called me into her office and she said, I've never seen a book done this quickly. Bravo. And then I called you guys and said, bravo to you. I mean, you guys were the minds behind it. I merely edited behind you and made sure the production wheels were turning. But I think necessity dictates that. Obviously, it's hard to get anything out in time like that, but we wanted to get it out before inauguration. Now people they can bring it with them to the Women's March. There's a lot of information in this book that we really needed to get out in January versus March or April. So a lot of people were behind this book, so it was really fun.
Yeah, we had a whole other team of writers who helped us write this book.
Yeah,
and
right.
without them, we wouldn't have been able to
Right.
put this out in 9 days.
Right.
Yeah, so definitely the quickest book I've ever worked on, and I'm glad for that. So, wanted to talk about any revelations, anything you've learned while writing these chapters, things you were surprised at while researching.
Well, I think, as I said to Nick once, the biggest surprise I had was reading about Richard Nixon turning out to be so much more liberal than I ever imagined in terms of, I think it was the environmental, the EPA. I think.
Yeah,
right, the EPA.
He had a very liberal healthcare plan.
Very liberal
that
healthcare plan,
ironically,
yeah.
Ted Kennedy scuttled.
Yes,
I
yes.
think Kennedy scuttled to think he could get an even more liberal one, and then when that never happened, he said, we've lost our biggest opportunity. Nixon actually would have supported this and did support it. I had no idea that Nixon today would be considered a left-winger.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
He proposed a reverse income tax. I mean, he would be even to the left of Obama today. But that's how far right our country has gone in the last 40 years.
But it was interesting in doing all of the research on the history in each one of these topics. You just pick up so much. It's been a while since you've been in school, and you forget all the history that we once probably all knew because it was in social studies and American history. Then you go back and you read this. Another one of the reviews I already read was saying, God, this is so much fun to read. It's like going back to school.
It is, and they're short and succinct. You can get through them. I learned a lot, particularly in the education field. My girlfriend is in education, and it's something that I think in New York City we see a lot of conversation about. So I learned a lot there.
It's funny you mention education. That was probably the toughest chapter we wrote because there's so much animosity on both sides when it comes to school choice and charter schools, and we really didn't want to take sides in that debate because, especially here in New York, it's just so hyper charged because some people, if you're a child who is in a bad neighborhood, who's to say you can't get a voucher to go to a better school? So we didn't really want to touch that. So
Sure.
we talked about Trump's pick, Betsy DeVos's, her more serious or crazier proposals, which go far beyond school choice. But
Yeah.
that was an issue that we definitely struggled with because we wanted to make sure we were neutral.
Right. Well, and also, the shocking thing that she had never even been involved in sort of any public education.
Wasn't
which
that
is-
interested in public
She's never
education?
been to public school.
It's scary. Anyway, do we have any questions?
We actually have a comment from Rebecca who says that with this book, she feels you're trying to predict the future,
Mhm.
and in a way, she sees that as fortune telling. What would you say to someone who?
Well,
kind
we're
of
not
feels
trying to
that way?
predict the future because the whole point is that we don't know the future under Trump. He's not said what he wants to do. He keeps changing his mind. So we want to give resources for people who can defend themselves and can fight back when the future comes, because it will be bad. And he isn't president yet, and it's bad enough now.
Right.
And as we've said often, this book doesn't say these things are going to happen. We say might happen, and this is what you can do if it does happen. I think we would be thrilled if it turns out that most of what we are afraid of never happens.
Yeah, with Obamacare, this morning is an article about how the GOP isn't getting enough support with their repeal
Right,
because
right.
of all people, Rand Paul said we should have something in place to replace it with, and they have nothing.
Right.
So it seems now they might not even have the votes in their own caucus to not just replace Obamacare, but to repeal it in the first place.
So we're not really predicting the future, we're trying to affect the future. It's
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, I mean, never once do you say Trump will do this.
Right.
This is definite. This is given his past or given his appointees, et cetera. He might do this. You should be aware of it. Here's how you can protect yourself.
Yeah.
Anything else, Kendra?
And as we were talking about healthcare, Deb just wanted to comment that she feels Obamacare is going to be renamed Trump Don't Care.
I like that.
Well, yeah, because again, if they can't repeal all of it, but they can repeal most of it, and the worst case scenario is that they lose 22 million people lose their insurance, and he will make America uninsured again, and it will be in fact worse than before because you will still require companies to cover people with conditions. They still have to cover them. So without people who are young like us who are forced to buy insurance, there'll be what they call a death spiral. So people who have insurance will lose it because they can't afford it. So the worst case scenario is that healthcare is just completely blown up.
It's make America sick again.
Yeah,
Yes, that too.
and there's a lot on healthcare in this book under the Obamacare chapter. So, what was your favorite chapter to write?
My favorite chapter. What's my favorite chapter? You go first.
Well, the LGBTQ.
TQ.
Yeah, we kept getting that wrong. That was the first section I did as a template for the other ones, and I think that was instructive because, again, so much can go wrong, particularly with this First Amendment Defense Act that could happen. So I think that set the mood for all the gloom that could take place. But I think for all of us, all of the chapters were instructive. I think every one of us worked a little bit on each one, trying to help. I think that maybe the energy chapter will not be as well read as immigration or civil rights, but I think that there's an audience for every one of these issues.
Yeah, especially Standing Rock is huge in the news right now. and
That's true.
So,
Yeah, I mean, just when I was in the middle of it with a lot of coffee and not sleeping very well, but during the middle of that, Fidel Castro died, and it made me think that say what you will about communist Cuba, but you could not get away with writing a book called The Castro Survival Guide, and the fact that we can sit here at HarperCollins and do this video
right.
openly showing our dissent against a soon-to-be sitting president.
Yeah.
And that's a good feeling. And
Yeah.
despite how bad it is now and how bad it will be, and it'll get worse, the fact that in 4 years we could try again.
Sure.
And that was very uplifting for me.
Right,
Sure.
and that's one of the things we say over and over again in the book is that if you don't like what's going on, particularly those for you that didn't vote,
Mhm.
vote in the midterm elections.
Yeah.
You have to vote.
Please vote.
Amber asked, does your book discuss diversity and how minorities should survive the next 4 years?
I would say so, because we talk about women's issues, we talk about civil rights, we talk about gay issues. But one of the things I think we also discuss is the fact that these days, almost everyone's a minority. If you believe in the environment, that could make you a member of an environmental minority. If whatever you believe in, if it's counter to the majority belief, in a sense, that does turn you into a minority. And so the dedication of this book is to the American ideal that our country is always governed by the majority, but never at the expense of the minority. And that's, I think, kind of the lesson of the book, is that we are a nation of many minorities, and we must be respected.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the day of the Jeff Sessions hearing right now.
Right.
You know, for what that's worth, and obviously he's been in the media a lot for his racial comments, and I mean, there's so many things, so many conferences and leaderships and different programs you guys mentioned. There's racial justice, leadership conferences, civil rights, Black Lives Matter. I mean, there's 3 pages of this, so I think it's a really, really substantial guide for those kind of things.
Yeah, and one thing we want readers to be careful about is that we saw during the election is that Trump would say some horrible, disparaging thing, and then just as that comment was getting traction in media, he'd do something else. And he kept changing the conversation, and we keep forgetting all the horrible things he said, and we couldn't process it. And then during his administration, like under Bush, for example, he proposed to partially privatize Social Security in 2005. And there was a lot of uproar, and the AARP and all these organizations, they got together and fought it and defeated it. With Trump, it'll be so much, so fast, that we don't have the time to process each horrible thing he wants to do.
And interestingly, on top of that, and this is, I think, part of the problem with the media, what are most people talking about? What's the media focusing on today? Meryl Streep. We've got Sessions up. We've got all these other, cabinet picks being decided on.
Right.
But you would think that the most important issue facing this nation today was Meryl Streep said the right or wrong thing at the Golden Globes.
Right.
He's a master at diverting our attention from what matters to what doesn't really matter. Not that Meryl Streep's speech wasn't great.
Sure,
It
sure.
really was. But
Sure.
it's not going to change the direction of the country.
What would you say to, I mean, obviously we all have opinions about his tweets, but how have those figured? I mean, I've never seen a standing president. Obviously, it's a new kind of thing, but like the amount of things that comes out of his texts, like what?
Well, he's harnessed the power of social media like no one with that kind of bully pulpit ever has done before. And it's a whole brave new world right now, because we have no idea how he'll use his Twitter account while he's president.
Yeah.
And what that, with international relations, will he
Right.
tweet about Putin, about a sitting president of the country? Who knows?
Sure.
And it's something that's really new.
Yeah, and we don't know the answer to the woman who asked before about predicting the future. We're not predicting the future. We're making some educated guesses at what might happen, but the fact is, she's right. We don't really know.
And that's the scariest part.
And that's the
Yes.
whole point, is you have to fight back against the unknown.
Right.
Yeah, and Cal says, she asks, what do you think is the most important first step for surviving the next 4 years?
I would say stay informed, so you know what you're fighting back against.
Actually, I would say before that, don't panic. First, you have to stop panicking. I know people who are still panicked, but if you can get past the panic, I would go with stay informed.
So don't panic, then stay informed. Because the truth is that you can read 8 articles online about the same issue and have 8 different points of view afterwards. So you have to make sure you're getting your information from a reputable site. First, from a newsprint source like the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and then you can go to sites like Vox. And if you want to get more analysis, but the first is to make sure you have the facts right. And then
And you guys provide a guide for that in the book of sources you like and reputable sources.
It's about politicalwire.com,
Right.
dailycause.com, Think Progress. There's probably a raw story. I think we talked about thenation.com. There's probably at least 10 of the sites that we feel are good. They're solid. They present news well, and you can rely on them for facts.
Right. And we saw so much of that during the election, of fake news sites popping up, of things being shared, of some hackers just, getting clickbait, basically, just spread false news. And I think more important, I mean, now more than ever, it's really crucial, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think we're gonna wrap up this live session. Thank you to Gene Stone and Nick Brownlee, who are the authors of the Trump Survival Guide. Again, this is on sale today, January 10th. You can get it at any bookstore or online. And also you should visit harpercollins.com/Trump to find out more and continue to spread the word. Thank you so much.
Thank you.